What's up everyone, Carlos here. This video will be a collection of all the previous videos I've done covering the feral predator and its story. The runtime is about 1 hour, but it's full of information over a lot of topics. It goes over the story, weapons, gear, inspirations the crew took for the creature, some backstory to the skull mask, and a lot of interviews that give us more details about the entire process of making this film. This video is loaded with information. A lot of you prefer 1 hour videos because it makes it easier to sit through one long video instead of searching for other ones. I will include timestamps below. Alright, here we go. Now that the Prey movie is out, we can talk about the inner details of what we saw. This video will cover spoilers and some theories of mine. Alright, so we know the story of Naru in this movie is how she wants to go against the normal traditions of her people. Women were not known to be hunters during this time period, but she wanted to learn how to hunt. She eventually picks up the skills required to become a hunter as the movie progresses and the story unfolds later on. Her brother Taabe is also a key part of the story. She sometimes is seen training with her axe. There are other times when she goes out with her dog and tries to hunt other animals. Even without the guidance of others, she still tries to learn how to hunt on her own. During one morning, Naru would see something in the sky. She perceives it as the legendary Thunderbird, but it's actually the Predator ship passing through. The feral predator is introduced early into the movie. Its first appearance is when it's dropped by this area and its ship leaves. It then goes on to track, observe, and hunt other wildlife. It first encounters a snake, but that gets gutted fairly quickly. This reminds me of the cover to the novel Predator South China Sea. For now, the feral predator is mostly using its invisibility and wrist blades when it encounters something that is a threat. When Naru and her group find a missing tribe member named Puhi, they see his wounds are from a lion, but something scared the cat away from its den. Naru also finds large tracks nearby, but it's not from a bear, it's something else. There's a part in this scene that plays an important role later on in the film. She gets this person to eat orange tutsia. She says it cools their blood. Since predators hunt by seeing our heat, you can see where this is going. If their blood is cool, they won't appear as warm bodies. Shortly after, the feral predator watches a wolf as it hunts. Then the wolf would fight against the predator, but it too gets defeated and its spine along with its skull gets ripped out. Later on, the feral predator goes to a cave and cleans up the wolf skull to be mounted on his own body. Let's talk about the thermal vision of the feral predator in this movie. I was looking at the text you see on the right side, but it seems almost none of it matches the predator alphabet that we know. But I was able to figure out one letter. I'm not 100% accurate or sure on this one, but it does look like it could be the letter F. A few frames later, the wolf has this text. I think the last letter could be a letter C, but the text is flipped backwards, or I could be wrong. Maybe this predator text is a new design just for this movie, and there might not be an actual translation. Naru would then come across a field of skinned buffalo bodies. She pays her respects to them and moves on. A little backstory to the skinned buffalo scene. During this time, French fur trappers were known to do this on purpose. The people who lived on the land would use every part of the animal, but skinning a body only for the fur and leaving it to rot was considered wasteful. One thing I noticed is the invisibility for this predator does not get affected by water like it was shown in the other movies, because water normally tends to malfunction the camouflage effect. But this predator's camouflage seems unaffected by water. It only flickers red in some areas, but it remains invisible. The red effect seems to happen when it makes contact with something, but it's not enough to disable the camouflage. During the scene we saw in the trailer with Naru inside a mud pit, some of us thought it was kind of a nod towards the first film in some way, but it was a different situation. Now, it's not like she figured out the mud would conceal her body heat, nor was she planning an ambush on anyone. She merely fell inside and was trying to get out by using the axe with the rope on it. Okay, let's talk about the bear scene. And this fight goes a bit different than the one we saw in the comic book. The feral predator battles a bear in a small stream of water. This connects to the area where Naru swam underwater and she hid within a beaver home. This scene was not that long, but it was really fun to watch. The bear bites down on the predator's right arm. Then the bear gets tossed aside. As the bear gets up, the predator charges it, only to get held down by the bear and thrown around like a rag doll. The bear was vicious. Then the bear rises from the water with green blood dripping from its mouth. It roars, and you think the fight is over, but it's not. As the bear walks away, the predator rises up once again with its back turned. It waits. The bear charges. The predator swiftly turns to the side, then lunges forward to unleash a devastating punch to the bear's head. Instant KO. God damn, it was awesome. It must have broke the bear's neck or skull or something, cause you do hear a cracking sound on the impact of the punch. That's when you see the footage from the trailer with the predator holding up the bear's body over his head and letting out a roar as the bear's blood covers its body. The blood pouring down must have come from an injury underneath the bear, and it could have occurred during the time the predator was getting thrown around on the water. Naru would escape the scene and gets into a fight with another member of her tribe about going home. The feral predator would track her down and observe from the trees as they take her away. I looked over the text in this scene during thermal vision, but again, I could only find 2 letters that could possibly match the text we know. Now we can talk about the spear gun. The biomask uses 3 targeting lasers to place a lock. Once the weapon is fired, the spears will go where the lasers were last pointed at. They will even turn in mid-air, fly around a bit, just to hit that specific point. One of the 3 men with Naru gets taken down with 3 shots from the spear gun. It reminds me of the spear gun weapons seen in the video games, like AVP Classic 2000 and AVP 2 from 2001. The first game fires very large harpoon-like projectiles that cannot be retrieved after they are shot from the weapon. However, these projectiles were very powerful. But in AVP 2 from 2001, the spear tips were smaller, did less damage unless it was a headshot, but they could be retrieved from a body or surface it was embedded into. The other 2 men are cut up with the predator's spear that can split into 2 pieces. One is like a club with a handle and the other is a bladed tip. After this, Naru runs away into the grassy field from the trailer. The predator would chase after her but takes down one other Comanche warrior. Naru would escape again into another wooded area. Naru gets caught by a trap and the predator catches up to her. She's now injured, trapped, and unable to fight back, so the predator lets her live. The French fur trappers would find her, bring her to their campsite, and keep her hostage in a cage. This is where we meet a man that speaks to Naru about this creature. He can speak many languages and is part of the fur trapper group. Asking her, "What did you see?" He thinks it's hunting the great beasts of this world. Naru then sees that Taabe is also being held captive. Both of them are later taken to an area and used as bait. This area is then burnt away, so whatever goes after them, it won't be able to hide. The fur trappers had set up an ambush area within. They plan to capture whatever goes for Naru and Taabe. Some of the men overlooking from a hill get taken out and the horses run away. This area has ash being blown around from the wind, and as it keeps making contact with the predator's cloaking ability, it seems like it malfunctions from too much contact with the ash. Simply from the way it gets affected from the left side, which is where the wind is blowing the ash onto the predator. Naru and Taabe are tied up to a tree, and they share a moment together as they reflect on their past. They try to come up with a plan to escape, but here's where Naru thinks this creature cannot be stopped. But Taabe responds with that famous line from the first movie, "If it bleeds, we can kill it." The feral predator walks into a trap, and the Frenchmen appear from their hiding spots. A net is thrown over the predator as it falls, but as the men revel in their victory, it's short-lived. The predator gets up, throwing them off him. We see it use a few new weapons here, the net gun, which is thrown by hand, is now attached to a device that expands and then retracts the net. We also see the small bladed weapon that unfolds. It wraps around the trap on its leg and cuts through it. It's later used as a throwing weapon. The shield that unfolds from the wrist gauntlet provides some protection, either from melee weapons, firearms, or arrows and stuff like that, but it can also sever limbs from up close. Another device unleashes floating objects. They then explode after a certain time. This entire battle scene is very entertaining, and it shows that this predator was not perfect. It walks into a trap and somehow doesn't see the men hiding. Perhaps the ash in the air had affected its vision mode, I don't know. Naru and Taabe manage to escape. Taabe looks for horses and Naru goes to rescue her dog Sigh at a nearby campsite. She meets the man who spoke to her when she was caged up. He seeks her help for medicine over his wounds. Naru ends up helping him a bit, and he shows her how to fire the pistol. She feeds him the orange tutsia, and his temperature drops shortly after. He hears a noise nearby, and the predator arrives at the campsite. The predator doesn't see the heat from the man's body because he ate the flower that cools his blood, but as the predator steps onto him, the man screams in pain and is killed instantly. When the dog Sigh distracts the predator, Taabe is able to sneak up behind it via a horse, and he smashes the predator's biomask off, revealing its face. It's more similar to the super predators, but with a slightly bigger forehead. The predator tries to use the spear gun on Taabe, who is riding a horse, but it seems like this predator forgot the spear gun uses the targeting lasers, but he still fires the weapon anyways. Since the biomask is on the floor, it's aiming at a tree. The spear gun shots miss Taabe, and they try to land where the lasers were last pointing, which is at the tree. The feral predator always used the spear gun with the lasers to lock onto a location, and there was no sign if the laser requirement could be removed to use the spear gun manually. Taabe has a quick fight with the predator in this area. The music during this short scene fits really well. I wanted Taabe to survive longer, but he gets killed here, and Naru escapes once again. Naru would find the surviving Frenchman named Big Beard. She knocks him out and uses him as bait. Then she would eat the orange tutsia, knowing that it will help her hide from the creature. Big Beard gets killed off by the predator, and as the creature is admiring the severed head of the man, Naru pulls up her pistol and shoots it in the back of the head, knocking the biomask off its face. While it's injured, she takes the biomask off the ground and runs away. We never get to see the vision mode that it uses without the biomask, so we can only wonder how well it can see without it. Their final battle has some great action to it, and it's all in the dark. Naru placed his biomask in a specific place near a mud pit as a trap. Their battle has a lot of movement and action. Now at one point, she lures it to slam its wrist blades into a tree. It appears stuck, so she tries to attack it with the spear weapon. The attack is blocked with the shield, but its right arm is cut off in the process. At the end of their fight, her dog appears to distract the hunter. She plunges her axe into its leg and slides under the creature, then jumps onto its shoulders and ties a rope around its neck. She jumps across the mud pit and pulls the rope, and the creature falls in. But it's not over. The predator rises from the mud, takes aim with its spear gun, and once again, maybe it forgot or doesn't realize the biomask lasers are used with the spear gun, but this time the biomask is right beside him and it's aiming at his head. He fires the weapon, but it changes trajectory in midair, misses Naru, then it comes back and goes through his own head, ending the battle once and for all. And that's how Naru defeats the feral predator in Prey. This is the second time this predator used the spear gun without the biomask on his face. Did he just forget that it needs the lasers to aim, or did he assume his stolen biomask was destroyed? Either way, it was a big risk to take until he noticed it in the end. We never got to see what vision mode the feral predator uses without its biomask, so we don't know how much it would rely on it. The flintlock pistol shows up again during the ending. This was the pistol given to Naru by that man in the campsite who spoke different languages. Naru hands it over to someone in her tribe, and it reads, Raphael Adolini, 1715. This is the same weapon that is seen at the end of Predator 2, when Greyback gives it to Harrigan after the city hunter is defeated. Right before Greyback hands over the pistol to Harrigan at the end of Predator 2, he says this to him: "Take it." That message and the pistol actually have some history behind it. This is where the story in Prey seems to not connect with the comic book of 1718, the story of Raphael Adolini, where he was a pirate that commanded a ship. He disapproved of his men stealing from the church, so his men turned against him. Raphael would fight against his men while Greyback Predator was watching them in the distance. At some point, Greyback makes himself known, and the two of them would fight side by side against the pirates. Near the end of the battle, Raphael gets shot in the back. The last pirate is defeated by the Predator, and as Raphael takes his last breath, he gives his pistol to the Predator while saying this: "Take it." Greyback would pay his respects to Raphael by leaving his own sword behind and taking the pistol with him. The offering of a weapon is a sign of respect towards another brave warrior. He then leaves on his ship and is not seen until the end of Predator 2 in the timeline of 1997. Now we have two origin stories of Raphael and his pistol. The comic book dates back to 1718, but he dies here and the pistol goes to Greyback Predator. In the Prey movie, which is in the year 1719, Raphael dies but gives the pistol to Naru. Either they don't know of the story in the comic book or they chose to ignore it completely. After the ending, the credits roll with cave-style paintings or carvings. It goes over some points in the story, but at the end, there's an extended scene. Naru and a few people would look into the sky and see more Predator ships arriving. This could lead into a sequel that continues the story of Naru. I was thinking that Greyback Predator would challenge Naru, he would win and take the pistol from her. Naru's story could end here if she dies. Or, if they might try something new, they would end the battle in a draw. I know this is an unlikely scenario, but it would be unexpected and not so predictable like all the other movies. Greyback could exchange items with Naru as she has proven to be a great warrior, and the Predators would leave to continue their hunt elsewhere. I really don't see a scenario where a group of Predators would wipe out the entire tribe as an act of revenge for losing one of their own, unless they are the dishonorable type, but I don't think so. Nothing was really linked to Billy's soul from the first movie. I was hoping Naru would be his ancestor or relative, considering the novel of Predator says that Native Americans had seen this creature before. Keep in mind that the novel was taken off a script version that was entirely different from the movie, so a lot of things do not match. But there is one scene where Billy has a vision where he connects with the hunter's mind. He's able to do this for the first time because he is a shaman with inherited psychic powers. This is what happens during this event. He was cast adrift in his tribe's collective memory, suffused with legends and ancient battles. He began to sway as he murmured an old Sioux chant, and though he could never have told what the words meant, he saw the image clearly. The legend described a Herculean adversary who had come from the meadow beyond the sky, a god creature of wrath, who had murdered half of Billy's people. This was all 100 generations ago, but the chant was very clear, as it repeated over and over that the god creature would return again. Billy quaked with fear as the chant locked in his throat. He could feel the breath of the ancient marauder, and the recognition sent shockwaves of horror through his soul. But there's still a chance they could make a sequel and create a link between Billy and Naru's people. I think that would be a great way to connect to the first film, and hopefully they will make a story where the Predator finally survives in the movie. When Naru gets out of the mud pit, it reminded me of Dutch being covered with mud and hiding from the Predator. You could say these two movies share a similar scene, so it could be another throwback to the original movie. About connecting Naru from Prey to Billy's soul in the first Predator movie, Billy is from the Sioux tribe and Naru is Comanche. Even though they are in different tribes, I'm sure they can fix that and still make a link between the two somehow. Maybe at some point the tribes could join together or something. Now, Big Beard cuts Taabe's chest like Billy in Predator. You could say that's a possible Easter egg. There's also the medicine pouch both Naru and Billy have around their neck. Seeing as how Naru was learning about medicine using plants, this is a common thing in Native American culture. Some could have actual medicine, others would have items for spiritual or supernatural powers. The script to the first movie was revised a couple of times, but the final version does say it's a medicine bag talisman. When Billy senses something in the trees, the other men stay behind him. The script says this: Schaefer signals for Mac to cover him and then moves low and quiet towards Billy. Dylan appears, looking to Mac for an explanation. Mac ignores him, concentrating on the jungle. Dylan looks forward at Billy, his eyes riveted to the canopy above as he unconsciously reaches to his throat. Grasping a leather pouch secured to his neck by a thong, he fingers the medicine bag talisman. Dan Trachtenberg and Jane Myers had a video interview with Nerdist, and Dan said this about the connection between Naru and Billy's soul. We don't want to definitively say that this movie are Billy's ancestors. That's kind of like saying, for now, this movie is about Naru, but later on, the opportunity to make that connection is there. He then brings up something about the skull mask on the Predator. He wanted this thing to feel so much more feral and primal. Dan says this: The Predator has always been portrayed obviously as a trophy hunter, and it made so much sense for it to feel like it's wearing that trophy, and I've always been smitten with the idea of aliens that are infused biology and technology, that it's sort of the biotech thing, so I love the idea that the mask represents that immediately. As for the feral Predator still using the spear gun without the biomask, in the first scenario, he was aiming at the dog Sorry, but after the mask was knocked off his face by Taabe, the lasers were still aiming at a tree. Perhaps the impact of getting hit by Taabe made him temporarily confused and forgetful of the lasers already locked onto something else like the tree. He still could have tried to use it hoping the shot would hit his new target, which was Taabe, before it curved around, but it did not work out that way. I still think this spear gun should be used while it's invisible, because during this scene, it was way too vulnerable for that kind of weapon. The spear gun has what looks like a trigger, as you can see here underneath. There's also these white lights on the spear gun. They light up one after another. I think this could be a timer to when it can be shot, or possibly if it can auto shoot. The lasers are then activated. Then the spear itself is loaded to the top of the weapon. So there really is a long delay before the projectile is fired. This gives the prey more time to react to the incoming attack. Therefore, this weapon could be in the category of being a fair weapon to use. All three lasers can target one area, then the shots will fire in one central location. But it's also shown that each laser can target a different area, as it was shown when Wasapi got taken down with a spear gun. The three lasers went to different parts of his body, and all three were fired one after another. As for the other scene like this, which was at the end, after suffering a gunshot to the back of the head, some fans have said that could have made him forget, or there was still some kind of trauma setting in that was left from that injury. But why would it only affect him using the spear gun and not every other attack he used on Naru, like the attacks with the spear weapon, the shield, and jumping through the trees to then lunging forward at Naru? I think in this situation, he just assumed his biomask was destroyed or could not be found, so he tried to use the spear gun without the lasers, but noticed the biomask was right there, but it was a bit too late. Naru had some idea about the spear gun weapon during the time three other Comanche warriors got killed in front of her. It was during the scene with Taabe that gave her more understanding of how the spear gun works with the lasers on the biomask, which is why she placed it to the side of the mud pit in the final battle scene. She already expected the Predator to use this weapon at some point. She just needed to get him into the mud pit. The face of the feral Predator is a new design. but it does look like some of it can resemble a super predator in a way. Dan did say it was a different breed of predator. I really don't mind trying something new, but yeah, it's ugly like all the others. I mean, it's supposed to be ugly. Okay, let's move on. When Taabe dies by the feral predator, it's a similar scene as how Dylan died in the first movie back in 1987, while Taabe gets stabbed in the back and Dylan is stabbed in the front. Both are from an invisible predator using the wrist blades and being held up into the air. There's an extended scene after the ending. It shows Naru and her people looking up at the sky as 3 more predator ships are descending. Some of you in the comment section have said this could be a recovery team, the ones that just want their technology and the body of feral returned to them, so humans don't keep the body and technology. That's also a possible answer, which does make sense. Naru could give the pistol to Greyback during this time. They don't necessarily have to fight, but a way to keep the peace between them for now so they don't go to war. Gifting the pistol would be a way for them to carry the memory of the brave warrior that defeated feral predator, and Greyback could hold onto it and give it to Mike Harrigan in Predator 2. Some fans have said the man that gives Naru the pistol is not really Raphael, but it's someone else who had his pistol which belonged to the real Raphael. However, the credits show that there is a character named Raphael, but no last name is given. I think it's safe to assume this Raphael is the man who owned this pistol and his full name is engraved on it. Let's talk about the limited armor on the feral predator. It's possible it was a young hunter with not much experience as the others. It was this predator's first time on Earth, so perhaps this could have been part of its initiation or rite of passage, as some might say. If you can prove to the others that you can take on a few humans and a few animals, we will give you more gear, armor, and weapons, and then your status within the ranks would rise. This predator was very durable and persistent, but also made a bunch of mistakes. During a video interview with Red Carpet News TV, Dan said this about the limited armor on the feral predator. Because we wanted it to be much more alien and creature-like being, we stripped it of its armor, but to protect himself, it now has a shield. And the way that shield unfurls is very advanced, even though it's seemingly more archaic weapon or tool. There's a reason why they used CGI in the film. They were trying to heavily rely on the suit, but that limited some ideas they had in mind. When they allowed CG to take over in some scenes, it really helped make their thing feel like it hasn't before and be an awesome alien creature. Dan Trachtenberg said this during another interview. I wanted to play up the iconic movie monster's alien qualities, which meant streamlining its armor and emphasizing its weaponry. I wanted it to feel much more like an alien creature than ever before, much more feral, ferocious, primal, and be less armored. So then, all the technological advances needed to be through its arsenal, through its weaponry. As for the creature's new design, he said these things from various interviews. I wanted to change it more than it's ever been changed before, so it could be a new sight, a new thrill, even for die-hard fans of the franchise. I think we struck the right balance, and then we had a team of incredible visual effects artists that helped augment the suit, so that in key moments, it could always feel like a living, breathing thing, so that it never felt like it was limited by movie physics. You know, that it can always feel the way it should feel, like as an alien creature. I wanted the Predator to be scarier than we've seen it before. It's intelligent and it has advanced technology, and that makes it even more difficult to take on. But because the movie is set 300 years in the past, those things need to feel a little bit older than we've seen them before, but also still far more advanced than what we think our Earthlings would be able to handle. I wanted to make sure the head was more proportional to the body. This Predator is much slimmer and less armored than it's ever been. It's more creature. It's still hulking and ferocious. As for why the feral predator has a skull on its mask, there is an answer to that question. Through an interview with GamesRadar.com, Dan said this: "You mentioned the skull mask. That was one of the earliest ideas. We wanted to suggest that our creature was much more ferocious. It's a little bit stripped down, but still embraces the code that we know a predator to hunt by. It's a trophy hunter. We just thought, wouldn't it be cool if it wears its trophy on its face rather than just on its hip? I think we happened upon something very exciting, though, and that's why we kept the mandibles exposed, which are so iconically predator, and it allowed us to still be engaged with the emotionality of the predator even while it was masked, which is something that the other films never got a chance to do. So yeah, I love designing this creature. He does not mention what prey the skull belonged to, but it does share some similarities to the river ghost from Predators in 2010, and also the original Predator suit before Stan Winston was brought on board to give it mandibles and dreadlocks. But if we ever get an answer to this question, I will make a video about it. There's some information about why they added Sorry the dog to tag along with Naru in this story. Dan says this during the same interview. The writer, Patrick Eisen, and I were very inspired by Fury Road, and Road Warrior is one of my favorite movies as well. And I love the image of Mad Max and dog, and love the dog in that film, and love that idea. We knew that so much of the movie was just going to be Amber out there on her own. We wanted to give her a little buddy, but we did not realize that it would be so challenging to work with such a joyful and spirited little animal on set. Another interview on BloodyDisgusting.com brings up other topics about the film. One of them is how he almost did not include Alec, Gillis, and Tom Woodruff Jr. They have been part of the Predator franchise since the first movie. He said this, "Honestly, I did think before I met with Tom and Alec, and I was like, maybe we should have a young new company that has never done Predator before, that would feel like they could throw down and have something to prove because I love giving people a start. But then I met with Tom and Alec, and they were undeniably charming, and we've talked a lot about what they had always felt, maybe a little handcuffed by in previous entries in the franchise, and how excited they would be to do something special with this. They are just wonderful people to be around. I've loved so much of their work and all the movies I've watched growing up that I could not help but say yes to them. I think they did go above and beyond in creating something better than anything they've ever done before, and certainly in the Predator franchise. Even as far as just movie creatures go, it's just an awesome movie creature." As for the music in the movie, well, Dan said this on Twitter. "When we were prepping the movie in Calgary, I was playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla and was like, well, this music is insanely beautiful. Who did this? The answer is Sarah Schachner. You'll be listening to her lots in the future, I promise." Through an interview on BloodyDisgusting.com, he also said this about the music. "I'm so glad you bring this up, because one of my favorite things about this movie is that we have such a beautiful score. It's funny because we started out tempting the movie with a lot of Sicario, and many of my conversations early on with Sarah were oriented toward making things atmospheric, moody, and drony. A lot of what is in the contemporary movie scores. Then, as we continued in the process, the movie started demanding that it have something different. The fact that we now have, I think, a great old-fashioned epic adventure score mixed with some of the other more atmospheric things and a rehashing of the Predator theme used for the Predator itself, which is like the Predator now sonically announcing, Predator movie is coming. Predator movie is coming. I think it's absolutely tremendous. I'm so glad that we evolved the way that we did. Now I have a score to a movie that, as a kid, I would be listening to over and over and over again on its own, separate from the movie. I think it's actually beautiful music. If you want to listen to the music from the film, the Prey soundtrack is available on Amazon, iTunes, and Spotify. Since we're talking about video game inspirations, I found this from a video interview with Any Good Films. Dan mentions he took some inspiration from the video game Predator Hunting Grounds. He says this, "Some of the movements that you see in the movie were taken from the video game. Predator Hunting Grounds is a game that we were all playing while we were developing the movie. While we were pre-visiting the movie, Fridays were devoted for us all to get together and hunt each other down. And there's some Predator movements in that game that were never quite featured in the films that I thought were so cool, and so we put those in the movie as well. And the last thing I want to include is a tweet from Jesse Ventura himself. He made a tweet about the Prey movie. Here's what he said. Prey movie. Great, great film. Amber Midthunder, you definitely ain't got time to bleed. Welcome to the Predator family. Danny Trachtenberg, thank you for making such a thoughtful, creative, and wonderful film. I want to bring up the comic book story of Raphael Adolini again, because the spelling of his name is a little bit different. If we look at the name on the pistol in the comic book, it reads Raphael Adolini. There's a letter F in Raphael instead of PH and a letter N in the last name. Since the movie came before the comic book, perhaps this was a mistake in the comic book. It's a small detail, but I just want to point it out. I think for most of us, we are just accepting the comic book as the connecting piece to Predator 2, but then Prey was released and we saw the pistol again. And if that wasn't enough, even the comic book of Predator 2 has a totally different name and date. It reads Vito della Mirandella, Anno Domini 1640. Okay, so now we have two stories on Raphael Adolini and his pistol. The one in the comic book, which dates back to 1718, where he met Greyback, and a different one in the Prey movie. So why did they even bring up the pistol if it already had an origin story? Raphael died in the comic book in 1718, but then another one is alive in 1719. So both stories are conflicting with each other. Do you see what I mean? It's either a case of them ignoring the story on purpose or they did not know about it. I did find one specific recent interview that does give an answer to this problem, and it tells us why this happened. The website Insider.com say they had an interview with Dan Trachtenberg recently. He wanted to plug in Predator farther back in time than has ever been done before in the franchise, and here's what he said about this topic. What came first was the idea of doing a movie with Native American protagonists and Comanche in particular, and then the Predator 2 light bulb went off and I was like, that's the date. That's where we should go. The pistol might have been in my initial pitch to the studio. But we already had an origin story of the pistol, which dated back to 1718 in the comic books. A younger version of Greyback Predator from the second movie is in this story. Raphael disapproves of his men stealing gold from the church, so they go against him. He fights against his own men until Greyback shows up to help him. Raphael is shot in the back and that pirate is eliminated by the Predator. Before he dies, Raphael offers his pistol to Greyback while saying this, "Take it." Greyback would honor this man by leaving his own sword behind and taking the pistol. Then he leaves the planet and is not seen in any other story until the movie Predator 2, which takes place in the year 1997. That was also an idea Predator creators Jim and John Thomas had in the mid-1990s for a sequel in the franchise. Here's the part where it explains why the comic book story about Raphael and the pistol was ignored and redone in Prey. Dan Trachtenberg said he wasn't aware of the comic book or the sequel idea when he and screenwriter Patrick Eisen developed Prey, but has since been filled in on the history. So yeah, he just did not know about it back then. Dan later added this response. It was only working on the movie that I learned about it. I was expecting when we got the go-ahead that we would get the Predator Bible. Here's all the info you need, the words we use, all the weapons that have been used. That doesn't really exist at the studio. There's been no continuity. When he was ready to work on the film, he was expecting to get an archive of material about weapons, characters, gear, lore, etc. This would have given him more information for existing stories like Raphael Adolini, but he did not receive that kind of support. So we now have two stories on Raphael because nobody told him about the comic book or he never looked it up. He wasn't able to track down the actual pistol from Predator 2, assuming it was buried deep in the Fox Studio archives somewhere. He then had to find another way to add it to the movie, so he spoke to Prey prop master James Rosenthal and gave him the task of making it. but during this process, he caught a big break. They were able to get a hold of this person from YouTube and get their copy of the pistol prop from Predator 2. The first person he got the pistol from is Nenny D. You can see his version is very accurate. During a podcast on Weaponized Nerd Rage, James Rosenthal says he got a few other copies out of a place in Los Angeles, but they weren't as good as the one he got from Nenny D. Now we can talk about the skull mask. We still don't know what creature or animal the skull is from, but we're getting closer to an answer. During the same podcast, someone in the chat asked this question: what animal was the skull helmet made out of, if he is allowed to say? James Rosenthal knows what animal it is, but he refused to answer the question. Perhaps he prefers to let the creator answer that question. If a Prey sequel does happen in the future, they need to figure out how the pistol that Naru has would end up with the greyback predator. Dan then responds with this: I don't think we've painted ourselves into a corner. One thing should not drive any sequel, but like in this movie, it's a fun thing to continue to include to make lore out of something that was just an idea, to embrace it. The end credits show a picture of more Predator ships coming down to Earth, while Naru and her people see them descending from the sky. No sequel has been announced yet. It's way too early, but Dan closed off the interview with this statement: I've been thinking about this movie since I was in 3rd grade, so there is definitely fun stuff brewing inside this universe for me. It would be awesome to make more. The last thing I want to bring up is from another interview over at the website /film.com. Dan talks about an idea that was never implemented in the movie. He said this: I was, for whatever reason, really obsessed with having the fights be more vertical and seeing the predator leaping through trees. By the way, I'm just now remembering there was an original draft for this for a long time. I mean, not just the draft, we prevised and almost had a fight where they were both up in trees in a treetop chase, just because that was hinted at in the physicality in the original Predator movie and never fully capitalized on. So that sums it up. Now we have 2 stories of Raphael Adolini and the flintlock pistol. They also changed how Raphael was a brave captain in the comic book, but in the movie, he became a translator and showed fear when the Predator showed up. I think it's pretty cool that a person on YouTube that loves making replicas of movie props ended up having his item appear in the Prey movie. That's awesome. What's up, everyone? I'm back to share some new information with you about Prey, specifically details about the skull trophy that it wears over its biomask and the creature's biology. There's also some discussion about a possible timeline for Prey 2 if a sequel is made. I was looking for more information about this, and I came across the artwork by Michael Vincent. You can find him on Twitter over here. He had the opportunity to design the feral creature and the mask design. This is what he said on Twitter: For those asking what my role on Prey was, I was tasked with the feral predator's creature design and mask design. An honor I'm still wrapping my head around. Gig of a lifetime. The feral emerges. I will forever be grateful for the trust afforded me by Studio ADI to design for this film. Godspeed, Naru. We didn't make it easy for you. When you think about it, getting any type of work connected to a movie truly is a memorable experience, but also an honor. I really do like the design he came up with for the bone trophy and the creature itself. A lot of us are asking this question: how does it see if the bone covers most of the areas where its eyes could be? And there's a very unique explanation for this, which I really admired for its creativity. Well, since Michael Vincent designed the creature, he gave us more information about its physical traits. He said this regarding its vision: heat-sensitive nodes under bone plates send the data to his network of heat-sensing organs in the frill, and compiles into a visual feed to his eyes. Predator, since the first film, has lousy vision when unmasked, at least in our atmosphere. Thicker brow houses heat-sensitive organs, which the mask is designed to interface with. Thinner casque loses less water. So the creature's heat-sensing organs would compile a visual image to his eyes. It's entirely through interface. That's how it can see with the bone trophy blocking any possible eye sockets. It's a very different way of seeing things. The organs pick up the heat signatures. You could say it's almost like how some creatures would use sound waves to get an image of what is ahead of them. Similar concept, but a bit different. The director, Dan Trachtenberg, did give us a preview of this creature's possible origins during past interviews, where he said this: "I think this guy's perhaps from a different hemisphere of the planet, and a little bit of a different breed. So even his look is a little new. It's familiar, but new. So I'm excited for people, even for die-hard fans, to really see something they haven't seen before." Michael also gave us more details about the feral predator's diet, which is linked to changes in the mouth. Here's what he said. "Bone has a special cultural significance to the feral subspecies, not only their armor, but as a diet staple. A careful look at the mouth reveals molars outfitted for osteophagy. It means the action of when an animal consumes bone. I spent a lot of time making sure that the various mouth parts puzzled together tightly, and it so happens that we just never got a shot with the mouth closed. The mandibles are meant to fit into the jawline like canines. The design of feral truly is unique and I like it. I'm glad they made something new but still kept some parts connected to what we saw before, so you can say it looks different, but it still looks like a predator in some way." Michael also made a post about the certain aspects of the feral predator's body. This is what he said in his post. "Genetic isolation with different environmental pressures yields a variant of Yaucha, adapted to a drier climate. Thinner, waxier dreads, thicker oral tissue and scalier skin for moisture retention, favors crushing bite for different diet. Breathes primarily through spiracles in the casque. Not those two big cavities, those are heat-sensitive pits, an adaptation for a less jungly, less oxygenated atmosphere." Feral does come off as being more primal or primitive in this film. The timeline of this story is in 1719, far behind when the other movies took place. Michael added this reply to this topic: "I was asked to do a pass on an evolutionary predecessor to Yaucha. The final design isn't that, but it was a fun exploration, though I don't think it worked. We spoke of time dilation playing a factor. 300 years distance could be any number of millennia to space-faring creatures." Here's the last bit of information I can find regarding the skull trophy on the mask. Over on Michael's Instagram account, someone said, "This design looks like the river ghost from the 2010 movie Predators." I also mentioned this in a previous video, and Michael responded with this: "Same home worlds, 300 years apart culturally, at least from the human perspective. Argument to be made that time dilation plays a part." So they could put the Predator into almost any timeline and make a story out of it. Dane DeLiegro, who played the feral predator in the movie Prey, did say he was interested in seeing the Predator take on a samurai. During an interview on Screen Rant, he said this: "I would love to see Predator battle some samurai. That would be pretty cool. That's a cool era. That's cool armor, and there's a high ceiling for artistic opportunity there, I think." This topic of samurai versus predator did get sent to Michael Vincent on Twitter. He said this regarding this idea: "My wife and I are gunning on this. Predator is the perfect sci-fi oni. In Japanese mythology and folklore, an oni is considered to be an evil spirit or a demon. Their size is typically very large, possess superhuman strength, and their appearance is fearful. This description can relate to a predator in some way. There's actually a great story that I covered about a predator versus samurais, which leads into a historical part in Japanese history during the ending. You really should check it out if you like the idea of predator versus samurais." As I read Michael's notes on the feral predator's biology, like its heat-sensing organs, its teeth that are designed for eating bone, and how its primitive look is based on a subspecies culture, I think that's fascinating. Creating a monster or creature for a movie is one thing, but writing up information about its biology, culture, and design is a great addition to the backstory of the character. The first interview is with Alec, Gillis, and Tom Woodruff Jr. It's posted on IndieWire.com. They run the special effects company ADI, which has been known to work with a lot of Alien and Predator films. the past versions of predators have been pretty bulky and wore a lot of armor, whereas Feral has been designed to be more leaner, wear less armor, and combines his current tech with bones. They first talk about the horror aspect of the predator in this film. Here's what Alec Gillis had to say. Dan brought parameters of likes and dislikes, and initially, one of the notes said that he wanted this predator to elicit more horror. So that got us talking about whether or not this could have been the origins of demonic spirits in the eyes of the native people, such as the Wendigo, that influenced our thinking. Before they settled on this current design, they experimented with a Neanderthal-style design, which proved too clunky and inelegant, so they continued to use the current iteration they came up with. One of the issues Dan had about the original Predator design was that it wasn't anatomically correct. In his opinion, the top portion of the body was too heavy while carrying a large head. They took that into consideration when creating their own version of a Predator. The end result was the most proportionally balanced looking creature, but it still took them a while to get it right. Dan wanted this Predator to be the thinnest it's ever been. Tom Woodruff added this comment, "We were quick to see that wasn't going to work after putting a guy in a leotard that had been printed with Predator flesh so it looked super skinny." The skull mask was the centerpiece, the trophy of a kill that the Predator proudly displayed. It connects with the indigenous people and how they hunt animals and use every part of its body in some way, and now it connects with the French fur trappers, how they hunt buffalo mainly for its fur. Alec Gillis added this statement about the feral predator's skull mask. The idea was that he found some alien and he hollowed out his head, added the tech bits that control his laser sight and heat vision. The director said before that he wanted to remove the plasma caster, also known as the shoulder cannon, because it was way too powerful to use on the Comanche prey it encountered at that time. Alec Gillis says this about this topic. It wouldn't be a fair fight. He did have the flechettes, the little floating landmines, which were intended to be little shrapnel bursts and were a precursor to his nuclear bomb on the wrist. The design process was a great chance for them to bend the rules and change things up. It gave the Predator more of the elements in which he plays a cat and mouse game with Naru. Creating and building the Predator costume started with a clay sculpture over a body cast of the actor. It's then followed by a negative mold of that. That's what they run the foam rubber into, and then we seam and patch and paint, and then ultimately we end up with a tailored costume. They also have to consider the accoutrements, like a loin cloth that was cut out of foam latex, some pouches, and a sculpted piece that looked like degraded metal that sat on the bottom of the ocean for a few hundred years. Alec Gillis then talks about how the creature is combining its tech with the bones from the prey it hunted. He says this, "And then he had his high-tech pieces, and one of the interesting design elements was that we wanted to keep to the time. When he's messing with gear on his arm, you'll see bone inlay. That's a reflection of the trophies being embedded in the technology." Dane DeLiegro, who plays the Predator in Prey, explains what he went through during filming. "It moved my head into the neck of this character, essentially putting everything on top of my head. I was looking through two holes in the neck and my face was hidden, while still giving me the vision required to navigate the best I could during all the acting and stunt scenes. It was form and function working in synergy with this character." He also says what it was like for him going up against Naru, who plays the underdog of the movie. Dane said this, "He's in it for the hunt. He's in it for the competition. It's no secret that he's a giant, muscular, athletic, trained killer. But there's a sense of hubris with him, lack of refinement. Maybe he's younger. I don't know. It's a game. It's about outsmarting him." Another article, which is posted on two sites, like thegoldennews.ca and inverse.com, has two unique topics about the movie. The stars had to go through a 4-week training camp where they learned about weapons training in Comanche archery, spears, and knives, while Amber Midthunder had the tomahawk. It was important for everyone to be as precise in the representation of Comanche warfare as possible. But here's the different thing about this training camp. They had to learn a hybrid sign language created just for this film, Amber goes on to say this: "We created a sign language. We used real Comanche sign language and also developed our own for the film." Producer Jane Myers would say this about this topic: "We created a native tactical sign language with Kevin. Even in his spare time, the cast, they would go down to the river and use it to talk to each other. They became competent. That gave it a lot of authenticity. We don't have many written records of how they operated at the time, so we rely on his survival instincts and knowing what he knows about war and culture. That inspired the way the characters united with each other." Another topic is something similar between Prey and the first Predator movie. When Dutch completed his trap in his area of the jungle, he would yell out into the night, which is a way of calling for the jungle hunter, kind of like luring it to his location where he has traps set up. Naru does something almost the same in the Prey movie. After she captures Big Beard, you can hear Naru whistling. When asked about this scene, Jane Myers said this: "I wanted to leave some native things that would appeal to natives and not all. We don't whistle at night because they tell you it calls the spirits." She says, "I don't even care." She has that French trapper as bait saying, "I'm going to kill you." She just saw her brother get killed, so she goes all out. She whistles at night. The natives are like, "Whoa," because that means that she is calling him, and behold, he comes. This is considered to be a cultural Easter egg for her and the native audiences. In Comanche tradition, it's forbidden to whistle at night. They believe it can call forth spirits, and in this case, the predator becomes that spirit, at least symbolically. Something else that I noticed in this movie is that this predator does not hang the bodies of its victims. We've seen other predators do this in other stories. Of course, not all of them get to display this act. But for a film, it was different to not see this one do it at all. Perhaps it's not part of its culture to hang the bodies, or maybe they just don't have any interest in this act at all. I'm not sure. I mean, we saw the skinned snake on the ground, but its bones were left on the tree branch above. Perhaps this predator or its culture care more about just the bones. Another article, which is posted on comicbook.com, has two key topics that I want to point out. The first one is how little input the studio had with the movie. Alec Gillis says this: "It's always a partnership with the filmmakers, and in this case, this felt more like an old school film. Despite being a studio film, this feels like a Fox movie, like a great old school Fox movie. This was Dan Trachtenberg's vision, and we got to work directly with him without it running through too much studio input." The last part of this article talks about how Aliens vs. Predator could return for another film. Alec Gillis goes on to say this: "I think there's certainly some good stories that could be told in that world, and it's not like it hasn't been done. What excites me about Disney's involvement in this is what they've done with the Star Wars universe, where you can have these standalone side story movies. It expands the universe and expands possibilities. So we're looking forward to filling in those spaces with cool creatures, cool stories." Over on Twitter, someone asked Dan this question about the scars seen on the arms of Naru and Taabe. Here's what they said: "I noticed watching Prey movie that Naru and Taabe have a very similar scar on their upper left arms. Is there a reason for that?" Dan responded with this: "Comanche cut themselves when they lose a family member. That was their father." Going back to the issue with having two stories of Raphael Adolini and his pistol, as you know, we have the story from the comic book, which has a timeline of 1718. Raphael ends up dying here and gives his pistol to a younger version of Greyback Predator. This Predator is then seen at the ending of Predator 2 along with the pistol. Then we have the new story of Raphael in Prey, which dates back to 1719. I did mention in a previous video that the director Dan Trachtenberg and the writer Patrick Eisen were unaware of the comic book when this movie was being written up. Even though the character is only listed as Raphael in the credits, some fans have been thinking it could be a different Raphael. Well, the actor Bennett Taylor recently did a Q&A on the Facebook group Predator Glasgow Yahuchua, and the first thing he says is this: "Hello Predator Glasgow Yahuchua page. It is me, Raphael Adolini of the movie Prey. So it is the same character from both storylines. We just have to wait and see how they're going to fix it in the sequel if and when that happens. Someone also asked if there was any cut content that he knew about. Bennett mentions that he read the comic book story of Raphael, and one thing he wanted to add was the line, "Take it." This would have took place when he gave the pistol to Naru, but it did not make the final cut of the film. The line that Taabe says, "If it bleeds, we can kill it." Now this was tested by Naru in another version of the script. She would have said it when she was caged up. Raphael would ask her, "Do you think you can kill this beast?" And Naru would say, "If it bleeds, I can kill it." But later on, this line was given to Taabe. Next question was this: how did he feel playing the famous Adolini and his thoughts of the new origin of him and the pistol, after many fans consider the pirate comic story its definitive story? Well, he says that someone on the set made a comment about this topic, saying that the fans are going to be pretty disappointed, because in the comics, he was a brave pirate, but in the movie, he's no threat to the Predator. Bennett also mentions that he was aware how the story of Raphael was changed in Prey, and he was worried the fans were not going to like it, but at the end of the day, he had to do what was in the script. But he does think there was room for both stories to exist. And then we have Kyle Strauts. He also did his own Q&A on the same Facebook group. He played the additional Predator in the movie Prey. He was asked if there were any scenes that were shot but did not make it into the final film. Kyle says there were a lot of scenes shot. One of them was of the indigenous village that he did not see. There was a celebration scene with drums and singing and a bunch of Predator stuff, but he did not go into detail about what Predator scenes were cut. And this is the end of the 1-hour lore video all about the feral Predator and the movie Prey. I hope you enjoyed this video. To see more content like this in the future, subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Carlos or Acid Glow. I'll see you on the next hunt.